Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, July 25th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the Biden Democratic strategy in the state of Virginia and around the country, where we are getting an early glimpse at the Democratic Party's 2022 campaign strategy. Now, when the Wall Street Journal released this article talking about Joe Biden's campaigning in Virginia, I felt that I could personally add something very related to this situation in its entirety. Here's a picture of me just a few days ago with Governor Terry McAuliffe at the first rally that was close enough to me that I could actually see the President of the United States. Now, I know I'm going to get a number of comments talking about how I was in attendance at a Democratic rally, and I'm fully prepared for that. But I do want to point out that this was an event in which President Biden was speaking at, and one of his first public events in a very long time. I have always wanted to see the President of the United States. I had seen Donald Trump coincidentally 2 years ago from this day. So if you actually go back, I was looking at my Snapchat memories, and it was a picture of President Trump that I took just 2 years ago in a convention hall in Washington, D.C. So I have always made it my main mission to meet politicians and to see the President of the United States. So for my attendance at this rally, I largely want to see what it was all about. It was a very interesting one. I will personally add everything that I remember from this rally in addition to what the article points out as well. But I knew that this would be probably one of my few times before I'm off to college where I could actually see the President of the United States in person. And I actually got to take a picture with Governor Terry McAuliffe, the former governor, and now running to be governor. And I also got a picture with the lieutenant governor nominee, Howie. But besides that, I just think that that was a very cool thing. It was 20 minutes away, 30 minutes away actually from my house, 20 minutes away from Washington, D.C. It was in Arlington, Virginia. It wasn't far, so I decided why not go. It was free. Everyone could go. There was about 3,000 people there, so it was pretty interesting. But looking at the strategy that was employed at this Virginia rally, I definitely felt as if this was an early glimpse into the 2022 midterm elections. Looking at this strategy that Biden and McAuliffe and the other Democratic speakers were able to use, everything pointed towards one person, and it wasn't Joe Biden. That one person was Donald Trump. This governor's race turned into a race between Donald Trump and Terry McAuliffe. And while we have seen political operatives in the past say that this is not a winning strategy, I cannot tell you what riled up the crowd more than invoking the name of Donald Trump. The argument is fair that the Democratic Party has largely been running against President Trump for the past 4 years. But it's a message and it's a campaign strategy that has clearly paid off, as shown in Virginia in 2020 and has shown in the rest of the nation in 2020. You see, Donald Trump's name is so unpopular that when you bring it out amongst swing voters, they end up being more obliged to back Democratic candidates. When you look at the way that the American public responded to the coronavirus pandemic and they responded to the economic fallout as a result of it, they pretty much punished the incumbent president, and that was Donald Trump. Had the COVID-19 pandemic never occurred, Donald Trump probably would have won re-election. And that's just the way that the American political system works. Major events, whether they are the direct fault of the president or not, will always fall on the laps of the incumbent president. In this case, it was Donald Trump, and the American public felt as if it was time for new leadership. But this is not just the last time that we will see Donald Trump's name mentioned. Donald Trump putting himself out there as a main messenger for the Republican Party has been a big reason as to why Democrats have been able to use him as ammunition against the Republican Party. Now, I don't know how much you remember about my previous videos talking about the gubernatorial election, but a quick recap in this Republican convention. The reason why it went to a convention and not a primary was largely because the Republican Party in the state of Virginia wanted Amanda Chase to not become the Virginia nominee. When you take a look at the polling data amongst primary polls, all four of them show that Amanda Chase wins the race. The reason why they don't want Amanda Chase, you have to go down to her campaign slogan, "Make Virginia Great Again." Her campaign logos and messaging, exact replications of President Trump. She proclaimed herself as the Virginia Donald Trump. Now, the Republican Party is not naive. They know that the Trump agenda was not working in 2020, didn't even work in 2016, 2017, or 2018, or even 2019. I mean, Virginia always has off election years. Every single year they have an election, a major one, at that determines either the state Senate composition, the state House of Delegates composition, the governor's mansion, or a midterm election, or a presidential election. So around the clock, Virginia is always running elections. So Amanda Chase in this position would be the fifth reiteration of a Trump-style nominee, as they had Corey Stewart back in 2018. They had Ed Gillespie back in 2017, who arguably wasn't as Trump wing, but certainly, I would say, was fully backed by the President of the United States and many of his supporters, and sort of embodied a very similar notion, given the fact that Donald Trump had won the presidential election just a year prior. While he may not have won the state of Virginia, Republicans might have written that off as Tim Kaine being the vice presidential nominee. But when handed defeats in 2017, 2018, 2019, and then 2020 by the largest margin for a Democrat since 1944, they realized by 2021, by this Republican convention, that Amanda Chase could not win this race. So they switched over to a convention process, which made it arguably more difficult. They invoked ranked choice voting. That way, Amanda Chase couldn't win by a plurality as she otherwise would have been able to in a primary. So Glenn Youngkin took the lead in the first ever convention poll, and guess what? He ended up winning at the convention. You can see here that as it starts breaking down, Glenn Youngkin only started out with 33% of the vote and finished off with 55% of the vote by round number 6. But in this gubernatorial election in the state of Virginia, the Republican Party was very clear that they wanted Youngkin to be the nominee because he was further disconnected from President Trump than the rest of the potential nominees. But now, President Trump, as mentioned at this rally, endorsed him 3 times. And the Biden strategy here was to bring up many major pieces that the Biden administration has accomplished, such as the COVID-19 stimulus checks, and potentially could accomplish the infrastructure bill, or certain pieces that Terry McAuliffe and Joe Biden accomplished together in the time period of 2013 through 2016, in which Joe Biden was the vice president of the United States and Terry McAuliffe was the governor of the state of Virginia. They are together, it seems to be a force to be reckoned with from the Republican Party. Biden and Terry McAuliffe, as told at this rally, have a very long history behind them. Now, Biden's campaign strategy was pretty much just pinning Youngkin to Trump. Terry McAuliffe himself called Republicans Youngkin, Trump, Republicans. Whenever referring to the Republican Party, the non-sensible Republicans, as they put it, they would always say Youngkin, Trump, Republicans. And the combination of the two, what the Republican Party is really trying to avoid is Youngkin's close relationship, or at least close connection, with President Trump as the Republican nominee. Now, there are credible ads out there in which Terry McAuliffe can be tied towards President Trump, where you can actually see President Trump and Terry McAuliffe hugging, where Donald Trump calls Terry McAuliffe out by name and praises him. But the thing is, Terry McAuliffe is not the Republican nominee for governor. Glenn Youngkin is. And as a result, Youngkin needs that endorsement. Youngkin got that endorsement 3 times. Now, Donald Trump doesn't like being pushed away from anything. He never wants to be told, or at least it seems, that he is going to be detrimental towards this race. Had he completely understood that, he would not even have endorsed Glenn Youngkin beyond the first endorsement immediately after the primary. But instead, this president, or the former president, goes out onto not social media, but onto his website and releases press statements where it shows multiple points of support for Glenn Youngkin, saying that he will make Virginia great again. The same slogan, the same messaging that the Republican Party tried so hard to abandon in 2021 is now being pushed onto Glenn Youngkin by none other than President Trump. But this campaign strategy, I think, will be effective, at least for Virginia, for right now. If Donald Trump tends to fizzle off, then it probably won't be effective in 2022. But we certainly did get a glimpse into what the Democrats want to do. They're going to be naming Biden's major accomplishments so far. They're going to talk about Biden's future accomplishments, what they could do if the Democrats are able to retain the trifecta, retain the House, retain the Senate. And then also how ex-candidate can work with President Biden in order to get many things done. You know, looking at President Biden's influence in many of these states, he probably has more influence in Virginia than he does in other states, in other swing states such as Michigan or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, but point being that he won these states that he seems to be interested in. When you take a look at President Biden's focus back during the campaign trail, he focused on the Rust Belt. I mean, he did not let a single state go. The way that Hillary Clinton might have, Joe Biden absolutely did not. He was very much focused on the Rust Belt. He was very much focused on the winnable parts. The Biden campaign was much more beautifully orchestrated than the Hillary Clinton campaign. The way that the Biden campaign worked was that they funneled tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars into regions across the United States where political pundits, including myself, thought that Joe Biden might be doing too much, where Joe Biden was already in a position where he was going to win Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. So why doesn't he redirect this money over to a state such as Ohio or North Carolina? Joe Biden spent equal amount of money and for the state's population and time in states such as Georgia and Florida and North Carolina and Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. But Joe Biden didn't really go into states such as Texas or into other states that seem to be quote-unquote pipe dream scenarios for the Democratic Party. Biden is a realist, and that's something that I think will be very helpful for Democrats in 2022. If you remember back in the Senate elections in 2020, the Democratic Party fought for some Senate races that they might not have if they were talking about the base value, the surface level understanding of certain states. Over $100 million was spent in the state of Kentucky for Amy McGrath. She only won 3 counties. She received just 38% of the vote. In South Carolina, over $100 million raised for Jamie Harrison. He lost by over 10 points. Now, I personally thought South Carolina was going to be much closer than it actually was, but Kentucky I always had rated safe for the Republican Party. Had they just listened to any political pundit, they could have saved themselves $100 million and redirected it to maybe a state such as North Carolina, where they didn't lose by a large amount, where they lost by less than 2%. Or maybe they could have redirected it to other states where they had narrow losses that might have been able to push them over the top through ranked choice voting, such as the state of Maine. Sarah Gideon raised a lot of money, but an increase of 10 to 20 million might have made a subtle difference, enough to invoke the ranked choice voting, and potentially we could have had a Democratic senator from the state of Maine. So Biden's strategy, I think, is to focus on the competitive states, which will be helpful for Democrats in 2022. And the messaging seems to be effective, at least so far. He mentions the stimulus checks. I remember this was something that the Republican Party was not in support of back in early 2021, but through budget reconciliation, the Democratic Party was able to pass it. Now, the American public was almost completely in favor of it. You saw a very large portion of the American public saying this is something that is good for the country. And when you look at the amount of Americans who said that this was simply too much money, it just wasn't that high of an amount. The overwhelming majority of the public views this as an overall positive, and Joe Biden really jumped in on these stimulus checks. He mentioned them at the rally in the state of Virginia, in addition to pointing out the fact that this was a major portion of the Biden administration's accomplishments, what they are doing in the United States Senate, in the House, and what they plan to accomplish in the future, and what they can accomplish with a Governor Terry McAuliffe. The Democratic Party also loves to bring in President Trump. I mentioned this earlier in the video, but it works. And I'm telling you now that that strategy for 2021 is likely going to pay off. We are nearly 100 days away from the Virginia gubernatorial election, and all the Democratic Party is trying to do is tie Youngkin to Trump. And while that may not have seemed to be an effective point of messaging immediately after the 2020 election, and many people do argue that once Trump's name is no longer there, the Democratic Party is going to struggle running policy and issue-oriented campaigns, which might be true. But for right now, if the winning strategy is to tie the Republican Party towards President Trump, they will likely do it, at least for the remainder of the year and potentially into next year. Because while President Trump is no longer in office, he certainly has a major role within the GOP. For Terry McAuliffe as well, he also offers a different type of electoral advantage that hasn't been seen in many candidates in the gubernatorial election in the state of Virginia. Now, the Wall Street Journal article points out a fun fact, if you were to put it that way, that since 1977, since 1977, the party that didn't hold the White House has won every governor's race, except for 2013. That Democratic nominee, Terry McAuliffe, at the time was not the governor, but ended up going on to become the governor of the state of Virginia, went on to serve his full term, could not run in 2017. If you're wondering why the Virginia, I believe, Constitution prevents the governors from running for consecutive terms, they can run for re-election in the future, but they cannot run back to back. So they have to take a break. Ralph Northam took over in 2017, and then that was won by Democrats by 9 points, a very big opposition towards President Trump. And then 2021 might be that breaking history moment again with, yet again, Terry McAuliffe as the Democratic nominee. Now, History hasn't necessarily been kind towards the Democratic Party. 2010, they lost 63 seats. 2009, they lost the Virginia gubernatorial election by over 15 points. 2013, they lost control of the United States Senate, lost 9 seats to the Republican Party, went from being in the majority, 53 to 47, down to 54-46 with the Republicans in the advantage. So looking at some of these races for the Democratic Party in the past, I wouldn't exactly say that history has been the best motivation or necessarily the best or too kind to them, if I was to put it that way. But the Democratic Party might be able to break history yet again with the one person who has done it since 1977. And the polling data doesn't exactly tell me that Glenn Youngkin is doing too well against Terry McAuliffe. Every single poll that has been released has been a Republican internal, yet Terry McAuliffe still defeats Glenn Youngkin. I'm kind of disappointed that there isn't more polling data, but maybe the American public isn't too ready to start to see polling data released for close races, or maybe pollsters just simply don't want to be wrong as they were in 2020. But polls in Virginia weren't too far off, and this will be the first true test to see if that Biden and McAuliffe messaging against Trump Republicans will actually work against the likes of Glenn Youngkin, because no better for the Democratic Party to test out a campaign method that they know has worked in the past but are unsure about now than a state such as Virginia, where they won by 10 points in 2020. While that won't exactly be the mark where I expect McAuliffe to win by 10 points plus, I do think that there is a good amount of buffer there where Democrats can start to see, did we see a significant reduction in support by employing this message, or did we start to see about even in terms of how much support we received in 2020 versus 2021, and what does that mean for 2022? The Democratic Party could not have had a better swing state to go into 2021 to see their first true test of their new type of campaign strategy, or I guess reused type of campaign strategy, and we will see if it works. But so far, based off the numbers that we are receiving and based off the way that the campaigns have been employed over the past couple of months, especially in races that are going to be competitive in 2022, it seems to be, at least currently, paying off for the Democratic Party. But only time will tell, and we have nearly 100 days until this gubernatorial election. I'm really excited to see what the results are, what the margin is in different regions across the state, because it will provide a very good understanding and idea of what we should expect in 2022. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2021 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.